In a world where left is up and right is apparently wrong, do souls make sense of it all? Or at least have fun trying? Gear up, friends, for Chicken and the Dog.
Welcome to another episode of Chicken and the Dog. I am the dog, and with me, as always, is the guy that still has feathered hair, the chicken. What up, dog?
Jealous much?
No. Well, you do have beautiful flowing feathers. I'll leave it at that.
There you go.
Look, guys, this is one of those recap shows that we're going to do this today, and we're going to talk about Vandy's, or as some people will say, the Vanderbilt Commodores season, 2024 season. It was definitely interesting, but before we get into that, this thing that you and I and everyone else loves, which is the chicken and the dog, is continuing to grow. It's maturing. Things are coming along. Good things are happening, and our family is getting bigger. It started out with the chicken and the dog, and then we brought in the gooch, and then Uncle Kenny stumbled his way in. Let's just say that. And now we have, and then OTC Kennels said, "Hey, I want to be part of that thing that you guys are doing," and he sees something special in that, which we appreciate that. And now someone else has said they want to be part of this thing, and they like it, and that, so we now have a producer of the show, and he's going to be joining us from time to time. He's not on today's show, but he will be joining us from time to time. And his name is Bryson. And look, we're excited about having him on. We appreciate his love so far for Chicken and the Dog. And welcome, Bryson.
Absolutely. And definitely appreciate the fact that he knows how to do a lot of things that we have no clue about.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention how, I was going to say stupid. I don't think stupid would be the word. Is ignorant I guess that would be the right terminology, because you could be ignorant and not be classified as a window licker. So
I was gonna just go with unexperienced as far
uneducated.
as our technical abilities, but if you want to label yourself as any of the other, you go right on ahead.
I own it, buddy. I'm okay with that for sure. But anyway, welcome, Bryson. It's going to be fun. And this, I don't have confirmation just yet, but this could very well be the very first show that is aired on Apple, iHeart, YouTube, and several others. So Amazon, I think, is another podcast platform we're going on. So thank you, Bryson, for helping us out. Now that that's over, let's talk about Vandy's season. And it was a very interesting, good season for Vandy. They went 6-6 in regular season, and then ended up playing in a bowl game and beat Georgia Tech 35-27. So I'm just gonna kind of run through their wins, their schedule real quick, and then we'll dive into it. So they opened up with Virginia Tech and beat them in overtime. And then they played Alcorn State and won. Then they played Georgia State and lost. Then they played Mizzou and lost in two overtimes. Then they played Alabama and won. Then they beat Kentucky. Then they beat Ball State. Then they lost to number 5 Texas. Then they beat Auburn. They lost to Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee to close out the regular season. They were all over the place. But all in all, not a bad year for Vandy. There's some very good, bright spots this season.
Yeah, great season by Vanderbilt standards. I mean, top 10 season by Vanderbilt standards. Gives you a lot of promise for what Clark Lee is looking to do over there.
Clark.
Okay. It's just a real nice surprise, Clark. Your quarterback, as you're going through the schedule results, I'm looking over at top Vanderbilt performers during those respective games, and basically 6 of those games Vanderbilt goes 6-6. This is not a corresponding win to loss stat, but in 6 of those games, Pavia was not only your leading passer, obviously, but he was also your leading rusher in 6 of those 12 games. An interesting stat. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I thought that was a notable thing. But a great year for these guys. What's jumped out at me was we just talked about Oklahoma in our last show and kind of recapping the year that they had, and we looked at it through the lens of almost disappointment or needed growth for that program that went 6-6. And here we are looking at Vanderbilt, went 6-6, and there's balloons and confetti and popcorn and cake and ice cream for everybody.
Yes. What's funny about that, what you just said is, and you're right. Last week when we talked about Oklahoma, it was like, wow, they went 6-6. Not the season they expected. And look, to Oklahoma standards, that's probably a very correct statement, right? But what's really similar, or what's actually similar between the two, even though, all right, so they're opposite. Oklahoma 6-6, not a good year. Vandy 6-6, yay, we did it. So very opposite, right? But what they share in common, my fine feathered friend, is they both beat Alabama. Sorry, Senior Chief. It was not good.
And how many times do you get to say that in a generation, right? That 2 6-6 teams owe one of those victories to an Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. Alabama went 9-3 this year. 2 of their losses came from one of these 2 teams. Wow.
Yeah, and that's why I say that's more of a generational stat, because is it unheard of that Alabama would lose 3 games in a year? I mean, might not be unheard of that they would lose 2. That it happens. Even Alabama loses a game every once in a while. But the fact that those losses came at the hands of a 500 ball club, that to me, I'd be interested to know, and maybe Senior Chief is the guy to dig this up. I'd be interested to know how often that has happened, that Alabama has lost to 2 500 ball clubs in the same season. I bet it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I would say so too. And also, I know this is the show about Vandy, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about Alabama Crimson Tide, although they are a storied program, so there's so much to talk about when it comes to that program in 2024 or years past, right? But I will say this. Were those 2 losses, and maybe, and I'll let you comment. I mean, not let you, because this is just as much your show as anyone else's, but so I want your opinion on this. What was the reasoning for those 2 dumb losses for Alabama? Was it the missing of Nick Saban? Was it DeBoer, Kellen DeBoer? Was it Jalen Milroe? Or was it a combination of all? I don't know.
I don't like the idea that these young men, these 18 to, I don't know, 30-year-olds now with super seniors. I don't like the idea that they would get so hung up on emotional results from the Papa Nick is gone. I don't think that happens.
You don't?
I don't.
Okay.
I think what happens when you have a coaching change like that, and make no mistake, that's a huge coaching. That's as big as it gets when it comes to a coaching change, not because of Kalen DeBoer. Nothing to do with him. It's simply the fact that you had the greatest college coach of all time. All time.
The GOAT.
Including your beloved Bear Bryant. I believe that Nick Saban bests them all.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. That's a massive coaching change. However, you're still the University of Alabama. There's still an expectation by these players, by any of the coaches that remained on that staff, by all of the coaches that came into this staff, by the new head coach taking over this staff. There's still that championship expectation. If DeBoer couldn't bring it, then Bama never would have hired him. I mean, Alabama could have had their pick of whoever they were going to go after, and they go after DeBoer. So I write that off as a reason why. We joked around about, did they spend a little bit too much time on Broadway the night before the game? I mean, this is a 5-point loss, 40-35. Do I think that Alabama could have been looking past a then 2-2 Vanderbilt? They could have. At that point in the year, nobody's really paying attention to Vanderbilt.
No.
They are 2-1 going into their first conference game against Missouri, and they beat Missouri.
No, they lose.
Excuse me, that's right. They lose to Missouri, who was already off to their own kind of like, what are these guys really going to be like? They lose to Missouri at Missouri in double overtime. And so we're all kind of thinking, all right, well, Missouri's certainly wiping the sweat off of their brow, and Vandy's Vandy. That's what we're all thinking at that point after the month of September. Alabama's coming to town, and you and I both fully expected Alabama to throttle Vanderbilt.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I made the comment in that show that I thought the only thing that would keep them from blowing through Nashville was Broadway.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what happened.
Maybe that's what happened. And I would argue that win for Vanderbilt over the Crimson Tide catapulted them for the next 2 consecutive wins that they would get. They weren't impressive. If you look at it, they weren't impressive. Not only in the scores, the actual outcomes, but the opponent. I mean, you beat Alabama by 5, and then you beat Kentucky. Yay, because they had a stellar year. You beat Kentucky 20-13. You only beat those clowns by a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're playing Ball State, another blue blood, not. And you beat them 24-4. You beat them by 10. Kudos. Right? So that win over Alabama, I would argue, really launched them to get them through the next 2 weeks. Then you face a number 5 Texas, and Texas beats you.
But only by a field goal.
So there's that still that mystique there a little bit about who is Vanderbilt at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you beat Auburn. Auburn also an off year for those guys. You beat them by 10. I think we were reminded in November that this is Vanderbilt. You're having a great year, building a lot of really cool stuff, but you get beat by South Carolina. You lose in Baton Rouge to LSU, and you get beat by in-state rival Tennessee. 3 consecutive losses. I don't know what this season is like. I don't think it's as simple to say, well, they were 6-6. If they had lost to Alabama, they would have been 5-7. Would they? Or would they have been 4-8? I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that? Do you think that Diego Pavia, whatever? What are we calling him now? Ernie.
Ernie from Sesame Street.
Yep.
They look very similar, and I don't think that you've ever seen them in the same place at the same time. So until it can be proven to me otherwise, I think he is, in fact, Ernie from Sesame Street.
Wow. Jim Henson would be very proud.
One of one
And
of
that's
his
the
kids.
Muppets.
Well, I think he did all of them, but you know, one of his little creations went to college, went to a big boy school.
Yeah. But anyway, if you look at Pavia, Ernie.
Hey, Bert.
Hey, Bert. He had 3 games in that season where he threw for over 200 yards. One, his highest, was against Ball State, as he should have. 2, his next one was against Georgia State, as he should have, and he lost that game. His next one was against Alabama. He threw for 252 yards. So was Ernie. I always like to pinpoint what was the cause of a season, whether it was a good season, bad season, a win or a loss. What was the cause of it? And so my question is, was Ernie the reason for a good Vandy season, or was it Clark Lee?
I think it was both. I hope it was both. I hope that was more sided toward what Coach Lee brings to this program, because, as I mentioned, the 6 out of 12 games where Ernie was the leading passer and the leading rusher, to take the growth that happened this past year for the Commodores and continue that. In fact, to build upon it in 2025, there has to be more than the Sesame Street show. Because we've talked about it before with all of these other SEC schools. I'm sure we'll mention it again, probably multiple times. We'll probably say it every week that we recap a school, and then every week that we forecast next year. Your conference schedule's just flipped home and away. That's the only thing that changed. So for Vanderbilt, you're not catching any of these guys off guard. Alabama is going to beat you like a drum next year.
Oh, my God.
They will make you pay for beating them.
What's the barbecue place in Tuscaloosa?
Dreamland.
Just go there and eat. Just stay there. Have a beer or two. Relax. Don't show up. You will be better off.
If you don't go to Dreamland, your trip will be a nightmare. What's going to happen in Kentucky, or excuse me, in Nashville next year against Kentucky? I don't know. A lot to be seen with those guys. Texas is going to beat you again. Auburn is going to try and figure out a way to make next year better than this year was. And a game that close, I don't think that they're going to lose to you. You're going to be in for a fight through your entire SEC schedule next year. And if all you've got is Ernie, oh, God.
Will Oscar the Grouch show up at some point?
Would you not, if you're Vanderbilt and all you got is Ernie, would you not take anybody you could find?
Oh, for sure.
Oscar, Cookie Monster, Hebert, whatever. Big Bird, for crying out loud.
Beaker.
Sure.
Take them all. You didn't mention they do. Okay, so here you kind of went over most of them, but their conference play next year is at home. They play Mizzou. They lost to Mizzou this year. That'll be an interesting game, because they are playing in Nashville. Brady Cook, I believe, is gone. I mean, he's only played in the league. I think this is his 13th or 14th season. He came in the year after Stetson did. So I think he's gone. So the evil one will have a new quarterback, but he's probably, because it's gonna. Well, I don't know what week it is. We don't know yet. But if it's early in the season like this year was, I'm sure he's got plenty of that sprinkle dust to sprinkle over the field, and yeah, they may struggle. You mentioned Alabama. We know what's going to happen. Kentucky season, my God, I can't wait for Kentucky seasons next year because of my dislike for Stoops. This could be. I guess I don't want to see anybody lose their job. I don't, but I just don't like I don't like his face. But I'm sorry.
It's good to have a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I don't know what will happen there. Then you got the Manning kid. Oh, so you play Kentucky at home. You play Alabama and Tuscaloosa. You play Kentucky at home. Then you got to go to Austin and face the new Manning. Good luck. Auburn, you play at home. That again, I think that'll be a good game. Carolina, you play at home. No, yeah, you play.
Carolina is in Columbia, South Carolina.
Is in Columbia. So, I mean, we'll get to Carolina season in a few weeks, but I'm telling you, I like what the Gamecocks are doing over there. I like Beamer. I think they should do nothing but improve. I don't see them backsliding at all. Kelly didn't have the greatest season at LSU last year, not to his standard. So I say good luck playing LSU next year in Vandy. And then you got to go to Knoxville next year. And that's probably going to be your last game. That's your rivalry. I said that correctly. And yeah, Tennessee. I mean, so I don't think their season is an up season. I next year. I think they lucked out this year. I'm not going to say lucked out. They played well. We were pulling for them most of the season, actually all of the season until the bowl game, when you took a turn on them when the judge announced that Pavia or Ernie is able to come back. And so how do you think Ernie coming back next year, how do you think that really affects them?
So I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
I did take a quick glance at their season next year, and without going through the whole thing, because that would take away from another show that we'll do later on, they do close out regular season against the Vols. Their first SEC matchup is in Columbia against the Gamecocks.
Ooh-wee.
Carolina beat them 28-7 in 2024. My comment, because there are a lot of people that are forecasting that South Carolina will backslide to some extent. I don't think they will, but there are people out there that think that that's going to happen. What that says to me is that game being the first conference game for Vanderbilt, I can't remember if it's the first one for Carolina or not. Doesn't matter. That will be a real big test for both of these schools. Is Carolina going to backslide? If they are, a loss to Vandy would tend people to lean that way. I don't think Carolina beating Vanderbilt would disprove a backslide theory for the Gamecocks, but I do feel that if Vanderbilt comes out with a loss against South Carolina in that first conference matchup, it could be the beginning of a long year for these guys.
It is both of y'all's first SEC game, week 3.
There you go. There you go. So it'll be time. You've gotten a chance to warm up against two non-conference schools. It will be time to lace them tight and hit someone. And again, if you're Vanderbilt, that's a big test. Now, you asked about Ernie, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into this. And this is your chicken scratch moment.
Ooh, another one, another chicken scratch.
Does the return of Pavea, Diego, Ernie, as I like to call him, does that actually hinder the growth of the Commodores? I know that there were all sorts of celebrations by Vandy fans when the decision was made to allow him to return until proven otherwise. I think it was an injunction that was granted, but to allow him to return and play another year, not allowing his JUCO years to count against his eligibility. So he comes back for another year. Everybody's excited because of the great year that they had with their starting quarterback in 24. However, 6 out of those 12, he's your guy, throwing the ball, rushing the ball. Everybody in the conference knows that that's what 2024 Vanderbilt was all about. There's no reason at this point to think that they're really going to bring a completely different offensive package next year. It's going to be a lot more of the same. There's going to be some twists and a few changes here and there, but it's not like you're going from, one style of play to a completely different style of play. You know what Vandy's bringing. If it's Pavia all over again, I don't think personally that bodes well for the Commodores.
So there's a lot to dissect in what you just said. Okay, let's start out and say this first. The injunction, the block, whatever it was, the ruling that happened was done by a judge in the great state of Tennessee, which is where Vanderbilt hails. So shocking, right?
Completely unbiased.
Yes. Probably went to Vanderbilt. So there's that. Will it stay? Probably. Because here's the deal. Now, if that was an Alabama or a Georgia that did that, or a Texas, or, an Ohio State, somebody like that would have done done that, everybody would have been up in arms and would have went crazy over it. And there would have been lawsuits filed everywhere under the sun. But because it's Vanderbilt, who cares? It's probably where it's going. That's probably where it's going to go.
Right.
So my guess is that Ernie is back next year under center. It's going to stick. So the question is, does it hurt or does it help? You think it hurts. I think it helps. And here's why. He's the best quarterback to play at Vandy in quite some time. He's pretty, as much as, and you and I were big Ernie fans up until that injunction, that ruling. And then we were like, okay, that's crap. We don't like you no more. Pound sand. And that was probably more you than me, but I jumped on board with you. I support you on that. I thought that was crap. Look, dude, you're 37 years old. It's time to go play big boy football or go sell cars. I don't care. But go do something other than play collegiate football.
Ernie's sweet rides.
Yeah. Open up a dealership. You've probably made some money with Vanderbilt. Partner up with someone. You could be the face of the dealership. Be like a vice president. You own 10%. And good job, right? But that's not what happened. He's come back to play. And he is that Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, Stetson Bennett. I'm going to scramble over the field. I'm just going to make stuff happen, and I'm going to win games that I shouldn't win. And unfortunately, you're going to lose games that you shouldn't have lost either, like Georgia State. I think because of his it factor, his scrambling, he's all over the place. I think he helps if it was another school, I would say it hurts him. If it was a blue blood school, I think it hurts them. Stetson did it at Georgia. He came back for his 17th season, and he won another national championship. I don't know, man. I think it could help Vanderbilt in the long run because he is a really good player. I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he's a good player. I don't think he is going to be someone that goes to the next level and does well. Maybe he does. I doubt it. I don't think it's to improve his draft stock. I think it's to gain a more paycheck and play one more year of football before you go to Canada and play.
Friends,
or Zimbabwe.
You will have to forgive the dog. He's a little slow. Let me explain something to you, my tongue-wagging friend. Stetson Bennett, and you're right, similar styles of play. Similar, not identical, but similar. Stetson Bennett had not just something, but several somethings that Ernie does not have.
I agree with that.
Stetson Bennett could still be Stetson Bennett. The chicken could have been the chicken and thrown the ball to Brock Bowers and had a lot of awesome things happen. And it did. Ladd McConkey was there, and a lot of great things happened that I don't think if it matters if it's Stetson Bennett, Diego Pavia, the chicken, the dog, anyone's grandma on that list, throwing the ball to those guys, good things will happen. We're not talking about a Georgia offense with Stetson Bennett or a plug-and-play Ernie. We're talking about Vanderbilt. And I don't want to take anything away from Vanderbilt, but I certainly don't want to graduate them to a level that they most certainly are not yet. They're not there yet. A good thing for Vanderbilt is that they only lost, I think, 15 total players to transfer this offseason. Only one of those was a starter, an offensive lineman. So you didn't lose any skill guys. You lost an O lineman, arguably a good one, 6'5", 330-pound Gunnar Hansen, and he's going to Florida State. So it's not like he's transferring down a tick. Well, maybe with the Seminoles record, maybe you could argue that he is. But he's not going to the Nashville School of Cosmetology to play football this next season. Okay, so Vandy doesn't lose a lot in the transfer portal. I'm not looking right now at what they picked up because that'll be for a show later on. But it's not a simple plug and play type argument. Well, Stetson did this and he's that, so Diego could do that same thing. It's not the same. It's not the same program. It's not the same offense. You couldn't look at the Georgia offense and say, if it wasn't for Stetson Bennett, I don't think those guys would stand a chance against anybody. You can look at Vanderbilt's offense last year and go, if they didn't have Ernie, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's kind of my point is, does Vanderbilt have another Ernie waiting to play? Or could they find another Ernie in the portal? And maybe they could. And maybe there is an Ernie Point out there somewhere that's willing to come to a Vanderbilt. Look, if Brett Vandergriff would have retired, he could have went there. It wasn't that far away.
Not that far away. I think, and I want to tip my hat to what he actually accomplished for Vanderbilt football this past year. I do believe that he was the heart and soul of that football team. I do believe that the success that they had fell heavily on his results. I don't think that a football game is based on one man. This ain't a Michael Jordan thing where one guy can just take over, but he was the heartbeat of those players, the locker room. Clark Lee's doing an outstanding job coaching all that. Here's where my problem exists. I believe that he built such a solid foundation that if we weren't talking about his return next year, it would have created an environment through transfer portal, incoming freshman recruiting, whatever, to take another step, even at the quarterback position. To me, it seems like at best next year is status quo from this year.
Yeah, I don't see
Maybe
they
you
go up.
drop a game. Maybe you drop a game. Maybe you go from 6-6 to 5-7 because you're not giving yourself the chance to grow. I don't think that it's a degenerative disease to have him in your locker room, but I do feel like it stunts your growth.
Yeah, and you may be right on that. I don't know. I think it can help them, but I will agree with this. I do think that it did stunt them to try to find, in the world that we live in today, in the transfer portal, to find one of those quarterbacks to come in and showcase what they've got. They did lose that ability by bringing him back. But as you were talking and describing our dear friend Ernie, I got to thinking about it. The way you were describing him, is he the new Shane Falco? He's got heart.
No.
What?
No.
Oh, dang it.
Shane Falco knew when to hang it up. Ernie does not. Go scrape some barnacles, Ernie.
That's right. You need to do something. Because I don't know, man. It'll be an interesting season, this upcoming season. Like I said, we're going to look, everybody that listens to the show, including us, and we do the show, we have short-term memory. So in 7 or 10, 12 weeks from now, when we have to do the recap, when we do the show about Vandy and their upcoming season, everybody's going to forget what we said, including us. So I think next season is going to be an interesting one, or this season. I guess we're in 2025 now, so we got to say this upcoming season is going to be an interesting season for Vandy. I think, like you said, the status quo, I think that's probably a very, very fair assessment in there. I don't know. I haven't looked at their entire schedule. They do have to play Virginia Tech again, as does Carolina. Carolina opens up with Virginia Tech. Vandy plays them week 2, and then you guys face each other week 3. So you both kind of have a Virginia Tech, a good challenge, then a cupcake, and then you face each other. I still think Carolina's too much for them. And I'm sitting there looking at what team, what conference out of this, what conference games out of here did they win that they won't next year? And Alabama is definitely the one that will flip. Is there any teams in here that they lost to that would flip? I don't see one. I'm sorry. You're going to lose. I mean, as far as conference, you're going to lose to Missouri. You can hate Eli over there all you want, but he's a good coach. He knows how to get that team in that mid upper tier range. He's done it for several years at Mizzou. I don't see that changing.
He uses the dark side of the force.
He does. And so they're not gonna beat Texas.
Darth Drinkowitz.
Is that the new name?
That's what I'm going with.
He's not gonna beat Carolina. He's not gonna beat LSU. He's not gonna beat Tennessee. It's just not gonna happen. He picks up a win again. He shouldn't have lost against Georgia State. So they pick up a non-conference win from that will equal out the loss that they're going to have to Alabama. And Auburn, I'm gonna flip the coin on that one. I think Kentucky, they beat Kentucky. That could be a coin flip as well. Who knows what Stoops going to do in Kentucky next year? Brett's gone. Got a new quarterback, and Stoops has done a really good job with quarterbacks, transfer quarterbacks over the years, except for Brett. He was not your guy this year or last year. So, I don't know. Be interesting. Vandy had a good all in all, I mean, hats off to Vandy. We said it many a times on the show. Anchor down. Guys, you did it, and you had a great season. 7-6.
7-6. I was getting ready to say they come in to their bowl game against Georgia Tech. We have a lot of respect for what Tech did this past year, especially going to multiple overtimes against your beloved Bulldogs.
8.
8 total overtimes. And those guys, they would not quit. They engineered a way to stay in that game. Anyway, but Vandy pulls out the win there in the Birmingham Bowl against those guys to close out their entire season at 7-6. Another game where Ernie threw for more yards and rushed for more yards. He's your stat line guy there for the Commodores in that ball game. But it leads to a bright future, I think, for Vanderbilt under Clark Lee. Don't know what next year is going to look like, but I do believe that there are good things to come with Clark Lee as your coach in Nashville.
Does Ernie have the opportunity in this upcoming season to have a game where he has the most passing yards on the team, the most rushing yards? He's already made that. He's already done that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So he's done it more than 50% of the games this past season. But is there a way where he does the most receiving yards too? I'm just saying, can he throw to himself and have the most receiving yards in a game?
I don't think it would have to come down to a moment where he threw to himself. But we mentioned that the offense is likely going to be largely the same, and they'll throw in, just as any program will, they'll throw in some twists and some changes here and there. In the Virginia Tech game, their reception leader, Skinner Jr., had 72 yards. In the Alcorn State game, their reception leader had 27 yards. Sherrill against Auburn had 31 yards. What I'm trying to get at here is there are a lot of games where the leading receiver for Vanderbilt had sub 100 yards. You come into a game against an Alcorn State or a Ball State, and you get Pavia throwing for 150, 200 yards. He's run for another 100 yards, and somebody decides let's throw a little wrinkle into things and toss it to the tailback who's going to chuck it to Pavia 30 yards downfield. No doubt. I think that with the athletic ability that Ernie has, he makes that grab, and maybe with that one reception and scooting it in the end zone because nobody sees that coming, yeah, I think he could own all three.
So there's your challenge, Ernie. When you listen to the show, as I know that you do, week in and week out, it's your favorite thing to look forward to every week is Chicken and the Dog. And I think you should share some of your NIL money with us, but that's a different topic. But as you're listening to the show, you heard your challenge. Make it happen.
There you go.
All right, guys. So look, I I did get confirmation as we were recording this show, so I can in good confidence I can say follow us on or email us at chickenanddog@gmail.com. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcasts. We're here, guys. We are evolving. So like us, share us, love us, and thank y'all for listening. You got anything else?
I'm all crowed out.
All right, guys. Love you. Deuces.
Bye.